Luke 10, when busyness makes you miss the better portion. The hardest kind of busyness is not created by useless things. It is created when too many good things begin asking to be treated as necessary at the same time. Dinner needs to be finished. A message deserves an answer. Someone at work is waiting on you. A family member needs attention. None of those responsibilities is imaginary, and that is why the decision becomes difficult. If you stop, something may remain undone. If you keep going, you may stay physically present while becoming unavailable to the people and to the Lord who are already in the room. Luke 10:38-42 enters exactly that tension. Martha welcomes Jesus and serves. Mary sits at his feet and listens. Luke says Martha is distracted with much serving. When Martha finally protests, Jesus says, "Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things." He does not tell her that service is worthless. He exposes what the many things have begun to do inside her. So the question is not simply whether your schedule is full, it is more searching than that. When many good responsibilities compete for your attention, how do you know which one's faithfulness truly requires, and which ones have quietly become proof that you are useful, needed, or good? Number 1. When responsibility starts carrying your identity. Martha's first movement in the story is generous. She welcomes Jesus into her home. Nothing about that beginning suggests laziness, selfishness, or indifference. The trouble begins inside something good. Luke says she is distracted with much serving. Luke 10:40. Her work is real, but so is the pull. She is serving in the same house where Jesus is teaching, yet the work has become capable of carrying her attention away from the one she welcomed. That is why busyness is difficult to discern. It rarely announces itself as disobedience. It often sounds like responsibility. You answer one more email because someone is waiting. You take one more task because the team is already stretched. You handle the family detail because you know how to do it faster. None of those choices is automatically wrong. But a quiet shift can happen. The task stops being something you do and begins becoming evidence about who you are. If I keep everything moving, I am dependable. If no one has to remind me, I am responsible. If I can carry more than everyone else, I am faithful. Then leaving one thing unfinished does not feel like a practical choice. It feels like a moral failure. I have noticed this in myself when the actual cost of stopping was small, but the guilt was enormous. The unfinished task was not dangerous. My identity was simply too attached to finishing it. That distinction matters because Scripture does not call us to neglect what love genuinely requires. A child still needs care. A promise still matters. Work we accepted should not be abandoned simply because we want a quieter day. But not every need is your assignment. Not every request is a command. Not every unfinished task is evidence that you failed someone. Before asking how to become less busy, ask which responsibilities are truly yours to carry today and which ones have acquired an extra burden. The job of proving that you are worthy of trust, affection, respect, or spiritual seriousness. That question may not remove a single item from the calendar immediately. It does something more important first. It separates responsibility from identity. And once that separation begins, another uncomfortable truth often appears. Sometimes we keep doing because receiving feels harder. Number 2. Receiving exposes the part of you that cannot perform. Mary sits at the Lord's feet and listens to his teaching, Luke 10:39. Luke does not describe her as solving a problem in the room. She is not improving the meal, organizing the evening, or proving that she deserves to be there. She receives. For a person who has learned to feel safe through usefulness, receiving can be strangely difficult. Doing gives you something to measure. You can count the messages answered, the tasks completed, the people helped. Receiving asks you to remain present without producing evidence that you earned the moment. That can expose dependence. You sit with Scripture and realize there is no box to check that guarantees you understood enough. You pray and there is no immediate solution to manufacture. Someone offers help and part of you wants to refuse, not because the help is unnecessary, but because needing it feels vulnerable. This is different from being genuinely overloaded. There are seasons when time is scarce for reasons you did not choose. Caregiving can be relentless. Work can become unusually demanding. Illness can rearrange a household. Luke 10 should not be used to shame people who are carrying real responsibilities. But real pressure and internal resistance can exist together. Sometimes the sentence, "I do not have time," is completely true. Sometimes it also protects another sentence. "I do not know who I am when I am not the one fixing something." That is the layer Mary's posture can uncover. Sitting at a teacher's feet was the posture of a learner, a disciple. She is allowing herself to be addressed before she acts. She is not asking her own activity to become the center of the moment. There is humility in that. Receiving says, "I am not self-sufficient." It lets Scripture confront rather than merely confirm. It lets another person help without forcing you to repay the help immediately. It lets prayer contain silence without treating silence as wasted space. If that feels uncomfortable, do not turn the discomfort into another project. Notice it. What becomes frightening when you are not useful for a few minutes? Being overlooked? Feeling tired? Admitting that you cannot solve the next step? Realizing that some of your competence has also been camouflage? You do not need to solve those questions before you return to the day, but you do need to stop pretending that constant motion is always evidence of faithfulness. Because when receiving becomes difficult, serving often begins carrying expectations it was never meant to carry, and those expectations eventually speak. Number 3. Resentment is often the invoice for an unspoken contract. Martha finally says, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her then to help me." Luke 10:40. Her sentence contains a complaint about Mary, but it reaches toward Jesus too. Do you not care? The work has become more than work. It has become evidence in a case. That is one of the clearest signs that busyness has crossed a line. The first warning may not be exhaustion. It may be resentment toward people who are not carrying what you decided to carry. You wash the dishes and keep track of who stayed seated. You finish the report and notice who left first. You manage the schedule and become irritated when someone asks for information you believe they should already know. The task may still be necessary. The resentment reveals that another agreement has been added to it. An unspoken contract. I will carry this, and you will notice. I will make myself available, and you will appreciate what it costs me. I will say yes, and you will eventually prove that my sacrifice mattered. No one may have agreed to those terms. Then resentment becomes the invoice. This does not mean every irritated feeling is sinful or that all resentment can be solved by changing your attitude. Sometimes resentment is warning you that a real boundary was ignored, that responsibilities have been distributed unfairly, or that you should have asked for help much earlier. That information matters. What does not help is turning resentment into moral authority. Martha does not merely say, "I need help." She asks Jesus to make Mary carry the work the way she is carrying it. Busyness can do that to us. It can make another person's different limit look like disloyalty. It can make their rest feel offensive. It can make their refusal sound selfish simply because our own yes has already become too expensive. I have discovered that resentment becomes easier to understand when I ask one question. What did I expect this effort to earn? Recognition? Automatic help? Permission to feel indispensable? Proof that I care more? Once the expectation is named, the response can become cleaner. If help is needed, ask for help. If the arrangement is unsustainable, change the arrangement. If the responsibility is not actually yours, stop collecting moral credit for carrying it. And if the responsibility truly is yours, carry it without making everyone around you owe a debt they were never told existed. That is not passivity, it is honesty. Martha's complaint reveals the hidden contract. Jesus' response reveals something deeper. He does not begin with the kitchen. He begins with Martha. Number 4. Martha, Martha comes before many things. Martha, Martha, Jesus says, Luke 10:41. Her name comes twice. Then the diagnosis, you are anxious and troubled about many things. Luke has already told us Martha was distracted. Jesus now names the interior condition around the distraction. Many things have become loud at once. That is the turning point in the scene. Martha brings Jesus a management problem. Mary is not helping. Jesus does not first solve the staffing problem. He speaks to the person who has begun disappearing inside it. That matters because overload often persuades us that the only meaningful question is, how do I get all of this done? A better calendar can help. Delegation can help. Sleep can help. Clearer expectations can help, but none of those tools can answer the question Jesus places underneath the schedule. What has become so necessary in your mind that you can no longer hear anything else at the same volume? Busyness multiplies urgency. A delayed email, a sink full of dishes, a difficult conversation, tomorrow's meeting, a favor someone requested. Each one starts asking for immediate emotional attention. The mind becomes a room where every voice is speaking at once. Then the body keeps moving because movement feels like the only way to reduce the noise. But Jesus' first response is not efficiency, it is attention. Martha, Martha, before the many things there is a person standing before Christ. Your value does not rise with the number of problems you can absorb. Your faithfulness is not measured by how difficult it is for anyone else to function without you. And your spiritual life is not located somewhere after the list is finally finished. That list may never be completely finished. This is where the question changes. Instead of asking, how can I complete everything without disappointing anyone? Ask, what is actually required of me in this moment, and what have I merely made emotionally non-negotiable? Those are not the same. You may discover that dinner still needs to be made. You may discover that the message can wait. You may discover that the conversation you have been postponing is more important than 3 tasks you have been completing to avoid it. You may discover that someone else can carry part of the work if you stop assuming that asking is weakness. None of those answers is guaranteed by Luke 10. The passage does not give a universal rule for what should remain unfinished. It gives a deeper order. Jesus addresses the person before the productivity problem. Only then does he say something that can be easily misunderstood. One thing is necessary. Number 5. The one thing is not a productivity trick. Jesus says, but one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken away from her. Luke 10:42. That sentence can be flattened into advice about slowing down. It is more demanding than that. Mary is not merely resting while Martha works. She is sitting at the Lord's feet, listening to his word. Her attention is not empty. It is directed. That is why the better portion cannot be reduced to a quieter lifestyle. A person can have an empty calendar and still be spiritually distracted. You can cancel commitments and spend the recovered hours scrolling. You can leave work early and carry the same anxious interior home with you. You can build a beautiful morning routine and turn it into another performance you use to judge yourself. Less activity is not automatically the better portion. The better portion is ordered attention. Mary allows the presence and word of Christ to establish what is primary before the rest of the household tells her what is urgent. That is discipleship, not escape. The distinction matters for daily guidance because most listeners cannot simply remove ordinary life. Meals still need to happen. Children still need attention. Jobs still require effort. Some seasons contain more service than others. And Scripture does not shame faithful labor. Luke 10 asks whether the labor still knows what it is for. Service can be an expression of love. It becomes distorted when it replaces the relationship it was meant to express. Prayer can orient the heart. It becomes distorted when it is turned into another box that proves you are disciplined. Bible reading can form discernment. It becomes distorted when the goal is merely to complete the plan and move on. The one thing does not give you permission to call everything else unimportant. It keeps everything else from becoming ultimate. That is why the better portion can travel with you into an ordinary day. You may have only a few quiet minutes, not an hour. Use them to receive, not perform. Open the passage and let one sentence interrupt the way you have been carrying the day. Do not ask, how much did I accomplish spiritually? Ask, What is Christ bringing back into proper order? Perhaps it is your need to be needed. Perhaps it is your fear of disappointing someone. Perhaps it is the resentment that has already told you a boundary needs attention. Perhaps it is simply the reminder that you are a disciple before you are the person who keeps everything moving. When that order is restored, you do not rise from the chair with a promise that the day will become easier. You rise with a clearer center, and that changes the next yes. Number 6. Before the next yes, ask what it will make harder to notice. Luke does not tell us what Martha did after Jesus spoke. We do not know whether she sat down, simplified the meal, asked for help differently, or returned to serving with a quieter heart. That silence protects the passage from becoming a formula. There is no command here that every busy person must cancel one task, refuse one role, or create the same daily routine. The faithful response depends on what is actually yours to carry. But the passage does give you a useful question before the next non-urgent yes. What will this yes make harder for me to notice? Not, can I technically fit it in? You can often fit one more thing. The question is what the additional thing will crowd out. Will it make prayer easier to postpone again? Will it make you physically present at dinner but mentally somewhere else? Will it make an existing responsibility thinner because you are adding a new one? Will it make resentment more likely because you already know you do not have margin? Will it make someone else's disappointment feel more dangerous than your own limits? This question does not automatically tell you no. Sometimes the faithful answer will still be yes. A person may need you. The work may truly be yours. Love sometimes requires inconvenience, but a faithful yes should not need to lie about its cost. And a faithful no should not need to treat the other person's request as unreasonable simply because you cannot carry it. This is where busyness becomes discernment rather than merely time management. You are not trying to build a life with no pressure. You are learning to notice when pressure is beginning to decide what only faithfulness should decide. If the request is non-urgent, pause before answering. Look at what you already carry. Name what would become harder to notice if you add this. Then pray without asking God to guarantee the outcome. Ask for honesty about motive, responsibility, and limit. If the yes remains clean, say yes. If the cost exposes neglect of something already entrusted to you, the faithful answer may be no. If you genuinely do not know, you may need time, counsel, or a conversation before deciding. That is not indecision. It is refusing to let urgency answer before discernment has had a chance to speak. Then return to ordinary life. Wash the plate. Send the email. Prepare the room. Serve fully when service is yours to give. But do not ask the work to tell you whether you are worthy, faithful, or loved. The better portion does not remove you from ordinary life. It keeps ordinary life from becoming your master. Conclusion. Leave one place at the table unclaimed. Tonight, look at the table before you clear it. Maybe there is still a cup near the edge. Maybe one message remains unanswered. Maybe tomorrow already contains more than you would prefer. Do not turn the unfinished things into a spiritual test. Ask instead what has been claiming the place that belongs to attention. Has usefulness been sitting there? Fear of disappointing people. The need to keep proving that you can carry more. Resentment toward people who never agreed to the hidden contract you wrote for them. You may still have work to do after you name it. Luke 10 does not promise that listening to Jesus makes responsibility disappear. It gives responsibility a center it cannot give itself. So before the next unnecessary yes, pause long enough to ask what it will make harder to notice. Before resentment becomes another invoice, say what you need. Before usefulness becomes identity, remember that Christ addresses the person before the list. And when you have a few minutes to sit at his feet, do not turn them into another performance. Receive. The better portion is not the reward for finally getting everything under control. It is the refusal to let everything else become more necessary than the presence and word of Christ. Write this in the comments. Teach me what deserves my attention. Then leave one place at the table unclaimed by busyness, and let service return to its proper size.